From our Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Zahra Syed. Our top story tonight. The UN Security Council has adopted a resolution urging an immediate ceasefire in Gaza after 5 months of Israel's war there. Introduced by Algeria, the resolution calls for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire during Ramadan that is to be respected by all parties, leading to a lasting, sustainable ceasefire. Despite Israeli objections, the resolution passed with 14 votes in favor and 1 abstention from the U.S. As a result, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu canceled a high-level meeting of an Israeli delegation to Washington that had been scheduled. Significantly, the U.S. did not use its veto power this time, as it had previously when it vetoed 3 UN resolutions calling for a ceasefire. The non-permanent members of the Council negotiated with the U.S. over the weekend to prevent another veto. Russia's proposal to include the term permanent in the ceasefire was rejected. Unlike Friday's U.S.-sponsored text, which was vetoed by Russia and China, the new resolution is not linked to ongoing talks to pause the fighting in return for Hamas releasing prisoners. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres stressed the resolution's importance, while Algeria's representative welcomed it. UN Director at Human Rights Watch Louis Charbonneau says Israel needs to immediately respond to the adoption of the UN Security Council resolution by facilitating the delivery of humanitarian aid. In the past 24 hours, Israeli strikes have killed 107 Palestinians and left 176 wounded. Palestinian medics say Israeli forces have targeted Rafah in southern Gaza, killing 30 civilians. Despite warnings from international leaders, Israel continues bombing Rafah. It is planning a ground invasion of southern Gaza, which currently houses about 1.4 million displaced Palestinians. Additionally, an Israeli airstrike late Sunday killed 22 members of the Salman family in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza, according to local media. Israeli forces have laid siege around 2 more hospitals in Khan Yunis, Al-Amal, and Nasser. Al-Shifa Hospital has been under siege since Monday. The Israeli military has blocked access, trapping medical staff and patients inside the 3 hospitals. Palestinians who fled the ongoing siege of Al-Shifa Hospital say Israeli tanks and armored bulldozers drove over at least 4 bodies and ambulances. The Israeli army says it has killed 20 Hamas fighters and arrested 500 others from Al-Shifa Hospital. Israel accuses Spain, Malta, Slovenia, and Ireland of rewarding terrorism for considering recognizing Palestine. Since October 7th of last year, Israeli attacks have killed 32,333 Palestinians, with 1,139 Israeli casualties from Hamas's attacks on the same day. Israeli strikes have killed veteran Palestinian journalist Sahar Akram Rayan and his son Anas on Monday in Gaza City. Rayan had worked for the Palestinian news agency Wafa for 2 decades. They were killed while trying to help wounded neighbors. On Saturday, 3 journalists, Muhammad al-Rifi, Abdul Rahman Saima, and Mahmoud Imad Isa, were killed in Israeli attacks. The Palestinian media office in Gaza condemned these attacks. It has accused Israel of deliberately targeting journalists to suppress Palestinian voices and hinder the dissemination of information. The number of journalists killed in Gaza has risen to 137 in the last 5 months, underscoring the escalating violence and its impact on civilians and media personnel. President Joe Biden has signed the bill passed by Congress, banning funding for UNRWA, the UN agency which feeds Palestinians, for at least a year. The U.S. was the refugee agency's largest donor, providing $300 to $1 million annually. The new law also bans funding of the UN agency investigating Israel, known as the UN Commission of Inquiry against Israel. The same bill allocates $3.3 billion in unconditional military aid to Israel. In January, the U.S. and several Western countries temporarily paused funding to the agency following Israeli allegations that some UNRWA employees were involved in the October 7th Hamas attack. The UN has accused Israel of torturing its employees to confess to something they have not done. After the initial ban, Australia, Canada, Sweden, and Finland have restored funding for UNRWA. The European Union has not only lifted the ban, but increased its funding to UNRWA. NGOs are skeptical about America's proposal to build a maritime pier off Gaza's coast to expedite aid delivery. Despite no scarcity of humanitarian aid, Israeli inspections and ongoing conflict have obstructed its distribution on land. Deepmala Mahla from CARE International questions the necessity of a pier when supplies are readily available nearby. Kate Phillips Barroso of Mercy Corps highlights that the issue lies in restrictive conditions at land crossings, suggesting a maritime corridor would not change much. Some view the pier plan as a symbolic gesture of desperation from the U.S. government. It acknowledges the need for alternative approaches to break through long-standing barriers. Approximately 24 Palestinian children from Gaza have been detained by Israel at Megiddo prison. According to a prisoners' affairs group, around 94 children are held at the prison in northern Israel, including 24 from Gaza. The Commission of Detainees Affairs and the Palestinian Prisoner Society say 40 children are being held without charge or trial. Jewish settlers raid Al-Aqsa Mosque on the occasion of Purim. Details come after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. More than 100 Israeli settlers forced their way into the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex on Sunday to celebrate the Jewish holiday of Purim. The Jordan-run Islamic Waqf Department, which oversees the holy sites in Jerusalem, said settlers entered the site through the mosque's Al-Magharibah gate under the Israeli police protection. Al-Aqsa Mosque is the world's third holiest site for Muslims. Jews call the area the Temple Mount, claiming it was the site of two Jewish temples in ancient times. Israel occupied East Jerusalem, where Al-Aqsa is located during the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. It illegally annexed the entire city in 1980 in a move never recognized by the international community. A New York appellate court has allowed former President Donald Trump to post a significantly reduced bond of $175 million to cover his $464 million civil fraud judgment. This ruling has also extended the enforcement of the judgment by 10 days. The move comes as a lifeline for Trump, averting immediate financial jeopardy. The court's acceptance of the lower bond marks an unexpected victory for Trump, potentially preventing the loss of control over his assets. Trump's attorneys argued obtaining the full bond was practically impossible. 30 bond companies had declined to offer Trump the necessary bond. The appellate court's decision grants Trump crucial time to secure his finances as he faces mounting legal challenges, including an $83.3 million defamation case. New York Attorney General Letitia James remains determined to pursue enforcement actions if Trump fails to comply with the judgment. The U.S. border security authorities arrested 140,644 people in February for trying to enter the country illegally from Mexico. According to Customs and Border Protection data, the numbers are slightly higher than compared to the previous month. However, despite concerns over immigration, this figure remains one of the lowest during President Joe Biden's terms. Republicans argue that Biden's policies encourage migration, while the administration cites global trends in displacement. December marked a record high of more than 249,000 arrests, followed by a significant drop to approximately 124,000 in January and February. Officials credit Mexico's enforcement efforts and seasonal patterns for the decrease. Arizona's Tucson sector saw the highest activity, followed by San Diego and El Paso. Meanwhile, CBP One app appointments at official border crossings reached 42,100, part of efforts to manage border chaos. Additionally, the administration has admitted 386,000 immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela under a humanitarian parole program since January 2023. Nigerian troops claim they have rescued 137 students abducted earlier in March from a school in Kuriga, Kaduna State. Army spokesman Edward Baba says the rescue operation, supported by local authorities, freed 76 female and 61 male students. Initially, 286 students and a staff member were kidnapped and held on a $680,000 ransom for their release. Kaduna Governor Uba Sani confirmed the students' release, thanking President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu for their efforts. Student abductions have been recurring issues in Nigeria since the infamous 2014 Chibok schoolgirls abduction by Boko Haram. The West African nation, with a population of more than 230 million, is the most populous country in Africa and the world's sixth most populous. Latest joint airstrikes by the US and the UK in Yemen have killed several civilians, the Houthi group claims. The Houthi-run Human Rights Ministry says more than 15 strikes targeted several provinces, including the capital Sana'a, killing and injuring a number of civilians in the attack. There was no immediate comment from Washington or London on the strikes. The Houthis have been targeting cargo ships in the Red Sea owned or operated by Israeli companies or transporting goods to and from Israel. A US-led coalition under the name Operation Prosperity Guardian has conducted intermittent airstrikes since January 12th, targeting Houthi sites in parts of Yemen in response to the Red Sea attacks. The Red Sea is one of the world's most frequently used sea routes for oil and fuel shipments. China has sentenced a prominent Uyghur publisher to prison for publishing books on Uyghur cultural identity and China's persecution of the minority group. 65-year-old Arkan Emmet was detained in July 2018 and accused of inciting ethnic separatism. His whereabouts and sentence length remain unknown. His arrest was part of a crackdown called Looking Back, targeting Uyghur intellectuals. Previously, Emmet managed bookstores and publishing houses, contributing significantly to Uyghur literature. His case reflects broader suppression of Uyghur intellectuals by Chinese authorities. Emmet's colleague, Kurban Mahmut, also faced imprisonment. It underscores China's stringent measures against dissenting voices within the Uyghur community. Family sources say he has been arrested for publishing the novel Altun Kesh, or Golden Shoes, and selling Zordun Saber's book Ana Yurt, or Motherland. Both books are about the persecution of Uyghurs and chronicle the group's victory over Chinese nationalist forces in the early 1940s and the establishment of the Second East Turkestan Republic from 1944 to 1949. A court decision has thrown the futures of more than 10,000 teachers and 2.6 million students employed in Islamic schools into uncertainty in India's largest province of Uttar Pradesh. Last week, the Allahabad High Court declared the law governing Islamic schools, or madrasas, as unconstitutional, ruling it violates the principle of secularism. The court directed the state government to immediately accommodate these students in regular state-run schools. Madrasa associations plan to challenge the ruling in the Supreme Court while expressing concern over its immediate effects. Uttar Pradesh hosts more than 16,000 recognized madrasas, including 560 government-aided ones and more than 8,400 unrecognized institutions. Iftikhar Ahmad Javed, chairman of the Uttar Pradesh Board of Madrasa Education, estimates that the court's decision will affect over 2 million students across recognized and unrecognized madrasas. The state also houses the historic and world-famous Islamic seminary Darul Uloom Deoband. That's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.